Good evening, everyone. We are reconvening the City Council meeting after closed session. We convened earlier this evening at 6 p.m. To meet with the city's labor attorney to receive legal advice and consider matters related to collective bargaining negotiations with the city's two unions. The meeting was closed pursuant to Annotated Code of Maryland General Provisions, Article 3-05B, 7, and 9. After the closed session, we are now reconvening. So I want to run through whether or not there are any changes to the agenda for tonight. And I do not believe that is correct. We do not have any changes to the agenda. Tonight we will cover two proclamations. The first proclamation is the B.B. Moore Campbell Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. And we will have an additional proclamation of notifying or communicating that July is Parks and Recs month. We will also have, that is a quick adjustment. We'll just do a quick update on the city manager search after the For the Record. And then we will have tonight a couple of presentations. One is the final report on the MWCOG grant for the Metropolitan Branch Trail upgrade, presentation of preliminary designs. And then there's also another presentation on the final report on the MWCOG grant for the new Ave Bikeway Section D. And there's a presentation of preliminary design for that one. And then we have a work session regarding the designation of agent for service of process. On Wednesday, July the 19th, we will begin at 7:30 with a public space management plan presentation. We will have a voting session on the resolution designating agent for service of process. We will have a work session, budget amendment FY 2024, budget amendment number 1, recommended amendments to the City Code Chapter 6.16 Landlord Tenant Relations and Chapter 6.36 Unsafe Buildings Public Nuisance Abatement. We will also have a work session on the proposed contract with Ministries United Silver Spring Tacoma Park MUST to oversee the Emergency Assistance Program. And then our subcommittee on committees will provide a presentation on the board and committee appointment recommendations. On Wednesday, July the 26th, we will begin at 7:30. We will have a presentation on the Urban Forest Manager's annual report. And we have a tentative presentation on the library update. We will have voting sessions on the first reading ordinance amending Tacoma Park Code Chapter 6.16 Landlord Tenant Relations and Chapter 6.36 Unsafe Buildings Public Nuisance Abatement. The first reading ordinance approving the FY 2024 budget amendment number 1. Single reading ordinance approving execution of a contract with Ministries United Silver Spring Tacoma Park MUST to oversee Emergency Assistance Program. Resolutions appointing members to boards and committees will be a voting item. And then we will have work sessions, one on the minor master plan check-in, a work session on the city manager search, process update and search firm selection, as well as youth council appointment recommendations. On August the 2nd, the council will meet at 7:30, and that will be our last meeting before recess. We will have a number of voting items. Second reading ordinance amending Tacoma Park Code Chapter 6.16 Landlord Tenant Relations, Chapter 6.36 Safe Buildings, Public Nuisance Abatement. Second reading ordinance approving the FY 2024 budget amendment number 1. Resolution appointing the 2023-2024 Youth Council. Single reading ordinance awarding a contract for the execution of search firm recruitment for a city manager. Resolution providing for the city council summer recess. We will also have a presentation on the quarterly financial report. All right, and that takes us into August. So next, I have a number of proclamations that I have the pleasure of reading tonight. The first proclamation is in honor of B.B. Moore Campbell National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month, which is July 2023. Whereas B.B. Moore Campbell is an accomplished African American author and journalist, advocate, co-founder of the National Alliance on Mental Health, urban Los Angeles, and national spokesperson for mental health education and support among individuals with mental illness and their families. And whereas she was recognized for her tireless advocacy and for bringing awareness and attention to mental illness among minorities with the release of her New York Times bestselling novel, 72 Hour Hold, and her children's book, Sometimes My Mommy Gets Angry. And whereas in 2008, the U.S. House of Representatives designated July as B.B. Moore Campbell National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month in her honor to enhance public awareness of mental illness, especially within minority communities. And whereas mental illness affects 14% of Asian adults, 17% of Black adults, 18% of Hispanic Latinx adults, and 32% of multiracial adults, 44% of LGBTQ adults, and whereas trans adults are nearly 12 times more likely to attempt suicide than the general population, and whereas mental health conditions do not discriminate based on race, color, or gender. However, a person's culture and identity can make access to mental health treatment much more difficult. And whereas, according to the Office of Minority and National Affairs for the American Psychiatric Association, approximately 2/3 of all people with a diagnosable mental illness do not seek treatment due to stigma, lack of community-based resources, inadequate diagnoses, or no diagnoses. And whereas the month of July is a time to amplify NAMI's message, culture, community, and connection, and to use this time to bring our voices together to advocate for mental health and access to care. Therefore, I, Talisha Searcy, Mayor of the City of Tacoma Park, on behalf of the City Council, residents, and staff, proclaim July 2023 as B.B. Moore Campbell National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month and recognize her dedication and commitment to influence communities to support mental wellness through effective treatment options, open access to mental health treatment and services, and improve community outreach to support for our family and community members. Thank you. Okay, and the next proclamation is declaring July as Park and Recreation Month in the City of Tacoma Park. Whereas parks and recreation is an integral part of communities throughout this country, including the City of Tacoma Park, and whereas parks and recreation promotes health and wellness, improving the physical and mental health of people who live near parks or participate in programs, and whereas parks and recreation promotes time spent in nature, which positively impacts mental health by increasing cognitive performance and well-being and alleviating illnesses such as depression, attention deficit disorders, and Alzheimer's. And whereas parks and recreation encourages physical activities by providing space for popular sports, walking trails, athletic fields, and many other activities designed to promote active lifestyles. And whereas parks and recreation programs are vitally important to establishing and maintaining the quality of life in our communities and ensuring the health of all residents. And whereas park and recreation programming and education activities such as out of school time programming, youth sports, and environmental education are critical to childhood development and socialization. And whereas parks and recreation increases a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas parks and recreation is fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community, And whereas Parks and Recreation is essential and adaptable infrastructure that makes our communities resilient in the face of natural disasters and climate change. And whereas our parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provides a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors and recreate outdoors, I should say. And whereas the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Rec Month, and whereas the City of Tacoma Park recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources. Now, therefore, I, Talisha Searcy, Mayor of the City of Tacoma Park, hereby proclaim that July is recognized as Park and Recreation Month in the City of Tacoma Park. So I wish I had brought some water because that was a lot of reading, but I am super excited to have the proclamations that we have tonight because they are critically important to our community. So next, we're going to move on to public. Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Councilmember Dabala. I was looking at the wrong agenda. I'm going to turn things over to Councilmember Dabala, who will provide a readout on our city manager search update based on subcommittee activities.
So thank you, Mayor Searcy. So here's a brief update for everyone on the council who's not already on the committee and for the public. So the three members of the subgroup are Councilmember Honzak, Councilmember Small, and myself. And we have 3 tasks: recommendations to the full council on a search firm, recommendations on community engagement, and the start of working on recruitment materials with the search firm. So our first step, as I said a couple weeks ago, was an RFP for a search firm to assist the council in the process. An RFP was released on June 24th, and it closes tomorrow. And on Friday, the subgroup is meeting to screen the applications based on the criteria that are in the RFP. That would be the qualifications of the firm and the personnel, the specific experience related to this type of search, the responsiveness to the RFP itself in terms of timelines and some of the other stuff that's in there, and the cost. So we plan to bring these recommendations to a council work session July 26th, as you may have just heard, and vote on an ordinance to approve a selection on August 2nd before summer recess, so they can be setting up and getting going while the council is not officially meeting during August. We also hope to bring to the council on July 26th three other things: a summary of what we learned from previous community surveys, outreach, resident surveys, and so forth about what we want to see in a community manager, a city manager, as several people have pointed out, not repeating what we've already learned. Secondly, our general recommendations on community engagement. For the current process, keeping in mind again that we're hiring a search firm to assist us in figuring out what the details are on that. So it's not a lot of specifics, but just a general direction, so that we can go to the city, to the search firm, and say, here, this is directionally what we're looking for, and a draft resolution on what we as a city expect of a city manager, in order to, again, to guide the search firm in how they can assist us, what the city wants and needs in that again, in a more general level, but to set a direction. And as I think we said last time, we do plan to utilize a lot of the materials from the previous search as a starting point as we go along and applying the lessons that we've learned. And we do expect the bulk of advertising and recruitment to be this fall. Interviews maybe November, December, hiring over the winter. So that, in a nutshell, is where we're at. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, I just want to thank Councilmember Dabala, Councilmember Honzak, and Councilmember Small for all of the work that you all have been doing.
And I would like to thank the ARPA manager, Andrew Baldock, and our human resources, our unsung hero, Human Resources Director, Lori Cannon, for the support that they have begun giving us and are surely going to be spending a lot of time with us as we go through this process. So thank you very much to both of them also.
Excellent. Okay, so now I'm just going to triple check to make sure I am right, but where are we at? Public comments. We don't have any voting items tonight, so we will start with general comments. Do we have any general public comments tonight?
Good evening, Sue Miller, Ward 3. I'm here tonight to speak about the minor master plan. But once upon a time, I was the PTA president at Piney Branch Elementary. And at Piney Branch, I learned that roughly 1/4 of the students were Latino, 1/4 were white, 1/4 were from recent African immigrant families, and 1/4 from multi-generational Black American families. It was exactly this cultural wealth, this diversity that had drawn our family to Takoma Park after the years we spent living in West Africa and Brazil. We could have lived in Bethesda, but chose not to. And at Piney Branch, I came to realize that our stock of rent-stabilized low-income housing was the key to our diversity. We cannot lose that diversity. We cannot let gentrification through new luxury high-rises on Maple destroy the delicate balance we have. We have something precious here. Our children have the rare opportunity to work and play across the boundaries of race, culture, and socioeconomics. I see how this is played out in the lives of my adult children. My son works today helping people released from Rikers to get jobs in housing. He has the cultural fluency to do that job because he grew up in Takoma Park. And it's because of the rent stabilization we have on Maple and Flower and New Hampshire that we have that diversity. So as a city council, I'm asking you to be 1,000% sure that this plan is not going to undermine what we have here, that this plan won't displace current residents or disrupt the diversity we have. What needs to happen? You need to put teeth into the amendment. You must ensure that we have a net increase in truly affordable housing. But we also have to ensure that we don't have any loss of rent-stabilized housing, because we know that any newly constructed housing will not have the same requirements for rent stabilization. And we know if there's gentrification, there will be economic pressure to sell off buildings that are rent-stabilized or turn them into condos. We have to ensure that we don't enact zoning that will accelerate the trend to a whiter and wealthier Tacoma. We have to ensure that the people most affected by all of this, the people in rent-stabilized units, get very clear information about what is about to happen about these threats, and that they get to weigh in. And you, the City Council, are the only ones that can make all of that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other general public comments?
Mary Jane Machui, Ward 2, again. I'm begging you. I'm so depressed I can hardly get out of bed in the morning. My son is practically a slave. He has a job that even immigrants don't want. He has a job where they call him when he's supposed to come in that day. And last week he didn't get in his 40 hours. They just called him and said, just don't come in. He has no guarantee of income. He's called in, like I said, he works on a job, and a lot of people with disabilities like his work at a job that the immigrants don't even want to work in. So emphasize this, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Machui. Do we have any other general public comments tonight? Okay, do we have any comments virtually tonight?
We had one person signed up, but she's not on the call.
Okay. All right. So let's move towards council comments. Councilmember Gibson.
Greetings. I want to follow up on a couple of items, and I didn't didn't pay attention well enough in advance to the agenda, but the Park and Rec Month. So my two or three of my comments all have to do with Parks and Rec. First of all, that Let's Play America will be having a play day on Saturday, July 16th in Ward 3, 10 to noon at the 5th and Orchard Playground. I'll include that in my weekly update. Today, or just yesterday, I was asked by a resident to check on some basketball hoops and nets in Spring Park that were apparently not in good repair. And to make a long story short, I have since learned that we are not allowed, or the city does not provide the nets. And these nets that are in at the basketball courts apparently will be taken down. So it's a policy that I'd like to revisit. I think that having the net around the hoop incentivizes the use, and so it was disappointing to me. And then lastly, I just want to note that next week is discussion around the public space management plan, which I'm really jazzed about. It is a much improved document, has a lot to chew on, to look at, and I would encourage people to look at. It's about Parks and Rec and much more than that, but I want to encourage folks to look at it. It's a hefty document, but it deserves your attention and your comments and edits and hopefully your support. Thank you.
Could you say the date again on the?
Yes, the date is next Saturday, July 16th for the Let's Play America Ward 3. And then I believe there's one the following day in your or maybe the next
tomorrow night. So the time on Saturday
It's
is.
10 to 2.
Sorry that I wasn't paying more attention. Okay.
And lastly, I guess I would like to second comments by Sue Miller about the minor master plan. I do hope that we can provide some guardrails and some vision, perhaps some teeth. I think that it's too big a deal to just let it happen without really a significant effort to frame it and to inform our community about it. Thank you, Sue.
Councilmember DeBala?
Yes, thank you. So as stolen with thunder, the first of the spontaneous play days in the next couple of weeks is in Ward 2, and it's tomorrow night, 5:30 to 7:30. Bring your water gun because it's gonna be hot. So come on down to Forest Park from 5:30 to 7:30. If you feel like hanging out, hopscotch, hula hoops, water play, whatever. Couple of other things. Next week, I will, sorry to say, not be with all of you. I'll be at National League of Cities meetings, chairing the Energy and Environment Committee for the NLC, which I'm the chair for this year. And I think that's, as much as I want to hear the public space plan presentation, I think that's also really important for our community to be represented at the national level with all the climate money coming through. So I'm doing that, and I wanted to push one last round of recruitment for committees, for city committees. We're not making recommendations on appointments till next week. So if you are thinking about doing it, this is a great time still to apply. Particularly, we could use people for recreation, speaking of recreation, Sustainable Maryland, and Nuclear-Free committees that could use some help. And so that goes for council members too. If you know anybody, this is a good time to ask them to come on down, so to speak. And last on the minor master plan, I would like to ask for staff to, not right now, clarify. I was under the impression that rent stabilization applied to new construction in Tacoma Park and that there was some initial period before it kicked in. I'm not completely clear about that, and it seems like a question that a lot of people have. So at some point would be a good point to fill us in Yeah,
the-
explain it. You don't have to do
sure,
it now.
The short of
Oh, it is pretty simple, but
Yeah,
then
the
please.
short of it, as I recall, it's been a while since I looked at it. For new construction, there's a period of, I believe it's 5 years, that you have to establish a market. After the period of 5 years is when rent stabilization would kick in.
Okay, and then I was recalling that what the county planning staff said, that the market rate in Tacoma Park, because we have so much stabilization, is much lower than a few, even a mile from here.
Right, I think that was a comment from Acting Director Cowler, but yes, that's my understanding as well.
Okay, all right, so we got that straight. Thank you very much. That's it for me.
Councilmember Honzak.
Thank you. I just want to echo my fellow council member Dabala about the committee membership. Please consider applying. We don't have all the spaces full, so I don't want to. I won't repeat it. I've been really enjoying working with fellow council member Fulcher, with our 3 RISE students who are oh so fabulous. We've been having a lot of fun, and I am very grateful, as I know is Councilmember Fulcher, to the city staff for allowing us to sit in your spaces and liaise with you. And you've really been generous with your time and helping to build some new leaders in Tacoma Park. And then regarding the minor master plan, so I want to just say a big thank you to our city staff. We've had a number of different citizen groups, as well as our own city council members, talking to the staff about what kind of information sessions we might be able to hold. What's the bandwidth? It's all very tight timing. And I'm very happy to say that Council Member Siemens and I and the mayor are going to be hosting a sort of Q&A session. This is absolutely not to replace the public record, just to be very, very clear. Public hearing, excuse me. This is meant to be a Q&A. We will be listening, but we will not be able to obviously answer a lot of those questions. Most of the questions that you will have will be answerable by the county. And we will not have the county staff there because county staff need to be working towards answering our questions in this public comment period on the public record. But we are your representatives, and we are representing the areas inside the zone of the plan. And so we want to hear from residents, what are your questions? And to the degree that we are able to, a few of our city staff have offered to be present with us at the meeting, and they will be making themselves available to answer those questions that are answerable during that session. And anyone, of course, is invited, but it is focused on those people living within the zone so that they can be more prepared for the upcoming public hearing period. So that is this Tuesday, 7 p.m., and we will be sending out the exact location. I think it will be at the Washington Adventist University. Don't have the exact room number yet, but it'll be a hybrid as well, and we'll be putting it out on Zoom, and look for that on the local listservs. And then finally, next week is Latino Conservation Week, and I have been delighted to see a lot of activity up on the north end of our city, where Parks Department has been publicizing information about that. The nearest event to us that will be in Spanish, there'll be some Spanish facilitation, is kids tree climbing from 10 to 12 p.m. at the Long Branch Arliss Neighborhood Park, which I think is a really cool event. Thank you. This Monday, I'm sorry, I thought I said that, Monday, July 17th, 10 to 12.
Excellent. All right. So I'm going to start with what happened over the weekend. Want to give a special thanks to the village of Tacoma Park for inviting us out to their summer fest. It was quite fun to catch up with folks, and we just beat the rain, which is also really, really fun as well. I believe Councilmember Dabala was there too. So no, it was a really great time to engage with so many residents in our community. It was really hot, but it was really fun. Oh, yes, you got there. Oh, I missed you. I missed you. But no, it was super fun, and special thanks to the Village of Tacoma Park for all of the work that they do for our seniors in the community. Couple of things that are coming up on Tuesday. Had a chance to participate in the Montgomery County Mayor's Lunch. We have that a regular meeting to just kind of have speakers come in and talk about issues that impact the mayors. And Carla Sylvester from the school board gave a presentation, and one of the things that I thought was actually quite helpful is when I asked about school capacity and infrastructure and what intersectionality does that have with planning and zoning. And she said, oh yeah, Tacoma Park, we're already hearing about your master plan and school sizes. So definitely is encouraging to hear. So it was really appreciative to have the opportunity to participate in that lunch this week. On Friday and Saturday, I will be attending the COG board retreat, and that'll be in Cambridge. So that'll be a great opportunity for me to engage more with members of the COG board. And so we will be doing that. Just as a quick FYI, the Metropolitan Branch Trail will have a public hearing on tomorrow at 6 p.m. And I know that there's the Ward 2 Play Day that may be happening at the same time, but I do want to let folks know that the Metropolitan Branch Trail public meeting is happening tomorrow. Councilmember Hanzak, Siemens, and myself are doing the minor master plan meeting with residents in Ward 4 and Ward 5, but we are planning a meeting for the Long Branch residents. So Councilmember DeBala, myself, and staff are going to be figuring out a way to meet with the residents in Long Branch. So again, we can have that opportunity to hear from folks around the concerns that they have, and more importantly, to encourage folks to provide their own comments and submit comments to the plan. So definitely want to continue to encourage people to submit your comments that you may have on the minor master plan. And so with that, I will turn things over to our Deputy City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council. Good evening, members of the public. Just a few updates this evening. The first is related to the mental health counselors. I'm happy to announce that this past Monday, July 10th, Montgomery County forwarded a fully executed MOA for the mental health counselors pilot program. Staff will now begin to work with the county to finalize a job description for posting and recruitment of the 2 counselor positions, and that'll happen as soon as possible. Based on the county's general hiring timeline, though, we suspect it will take around 4 to 6 months for the job posting to be posted, for us to hire, onboard, and finally begin to implement the program. In the meantime, city and council staff will be finalizing program details and communicating materials to include a program guidebook. Last month, the county program lead and the ARPA manager, Andrew Bullock, also met with the Tacoma Park Presbyterian Church Police Reform Group to answer a few questions program related to keep them updated on the project, and we will continue to update via city manager comments on the progress of the program. But we're very happy to be entering a new phase of the project. On Monday, July 31st at 7 p.m. And until 8:30 p.m., the New Hampshire Garden Community Association is hosting a discussion regarding possible traffic calming efforts along Wildwood and Glenside Drive. This meeting will be a hybrid with in-person gathering at the New Hampshire Rec Center located at 7315 New Hampshire Avenue. Representatives from the Police Department, Public Works, and our city planning staff will give presentations and be available to answer questions. The link to register to attend via Zoom will be posted along with the city manager's comments. And to round out this evening's discussion about the minor master plan, this is just a reminder that the plan, the public hearing has been rescheduled for Thursday, September 14th, 2023 at 6 p.m. for community input at the, on the plan. The public hearing will take place at the MNC PPC Wheaton headquarters on the second floor auditorium, and will also be held virtually. through the planning board's website. The public hearing can also be attended here at the community center. It'll be live streamed for public view and testimony. The link to sign up to testify at the public hearing will be included in tomorrow's posted city manager comments, as well as the quite a few options to post comments. All of that will be included as well. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, we'll turn things over to Mr. Eubanks to kick us off with our presentations regarding the MWCOG grants for the Metropolitan Branch Trail upgrade and the new Ave Bikeway Section D.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. I'm not going to spend much time introducing. I'm actually just going to turn it over to our planner, Alex Friedman.
All right. Good evening, Mayor Searcy and members of the council. For everyone watching, my name is Alex Friedman. I'm the planner for the City of Tacoma Park. And tonight I'm really excited that we will be sharing the final products from 2 projects funded by technical assistance grants, the preliminary designs for the Metropolitan Branch Trail upgrade and the new Ave Bikeway Section D, or as I'm trying to get it to be known as, the District Connector. Both of these projects were funded through the Transportation Land Use Connections Grant Program. We call it the TLC grant from the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, that we also call MWCOG. And each is a technical assistance grant, which means that MWCOG provided the contractors at no cost to the city. The city helps in the contractor selection process and directly liaises with the project manager, but we do not manage the procurement or handle any payments to the contractors. So this grant program has been an essential resource to the city for many years now. Since FY13, the city has been awarded 8 TLC grants, the 2 being presented today valued at $60,000 and $70,000 respectively. So that includes in FY13 a feasibility study for New Hampshire Avenue, which led to, teed us up for the grant that led us to 30% designs for the new Ave Bikeway. In FY16, a parking study near Metro Station, the Tacoma Metro Station. In FY17, we pursued the 30% or preliminary designs for the new Ave Bikeway, both sections that were in existence at the time, sections A and B. FY20 was funded a bus inventory, or a bus stop inventory, which led to a variety of bus stop improvements via Resolution 2020-2, the bus shelter prioritization plan. Then in FY21, Maple Avenue Complete Streets was the project that we pursued through this grant, and it got 30% designs, and that has led us into accessing funding for the Maple Avenue Connectivity Project that we are working on now. And then today, we have the Met Branch Trail upgrade and the new Ave Bikeway Section D. And then we were recently awarded for FY24 a grant that supports a Laurel Avenue traffic study. These grants are helpful because they fund technical studies, feasibility studies, long-range plans, and preliminary design and engineering work for projects that see the intersection of land use and transportation issues. Importantly, most state and federal grant programs require existing work on a project, such as preliminary designs, to be eligible to apply. As a small jurisdiction and with a limited budget, We rely on grants to advance large infrastructure projects to the finish line, but they become harder to acquire if we have to pay for the studies and technical designs from our own budget. So these cycles of funding allude to a larger reality or for projects like this, which is that cycles of funding often and hopefully align with the stages of engineering design development. So I wanted to take a minute to just review that process really fast. Often grant funding only supports the advancements of one stage at a time. And it's also worth noting that lots of different firms and planning entities use different names for these stages, but I'm sharing these in this way because they align with the stages that most of the grants that we apply for operate under. So for the projects being presented today, we have finalized preliminary or 30% designs. So this is the second section of 4 major design stages. There's sort of an ideation project identification stage that happens before the design work begins. There's preliminary designs, or what technically are called 30% designs, semi-final designs, which are known as 60% designs, and final designs, which are alternately sometimes known as 90% or 100% designs. The first is to determine whether the idea can or should happen on large-scale projects. This sometimes requires a formal feasibility study before advancing to the next stage. That next stage is the preliminary design stage, and that is when broad contours of a project are established based on some basic analysis of the space and parameters. This is the most flexible stage of the technical design process and when the biggest changes can be made. It's also when the largest amount of community engagement is often conducted because it has the most influence on the product. The next phase, which on all of our current projects has required a secondary round of grant funding, is the semi-final design phase. This is when the design layout starts to firm up and technical analysis deepens. The contractor looks at things like utilities, stormwater management, and environmental permitting. Some flexibility exists early on in this stage, but much less than during the preliminary design phase, because for every new stage, they have to redo the deeper analysis that they've already started, unless they are smaller adjustments. Then for the final stage, often referred to as 90% or 100% designs, this is when the designs are being polished off. At this point, it's pretty baked as a design. The final approvals are sought by peer agencies and utility companies, the technical documents are finalized, and the bid packet is completed so that it can be queued up for the construction process. So all of that to say is that these designs represent a substantial milestone for this project, the ones that we're presenting tonight, but the design is not yet finalized. There will be additional community feedback opportunities during the 60% design stage, and we cannot advance to that stage until we acquire funding, which city staff are currently looking into. And I want to note that in this visual that I put together, 30, 60, and 100% should, by most logics, be approximately equal in their widths. And I arranged them in this format not as an indication of time, but as an indication of how much change can happen in each stage of the process, roughly speaking, noting that the most change can happen early on, and the further along in the process we get, the harder it is to make bigger changes because those require backtracking substantially. So, and then construction. If all goes according to plan, we design it, it doesn't sit on a shelf, we get funding, and we get to build it. So, but what we are here today for is the projects that we're going to be presenting. So the first project is on the preliminary designs for the Metropolitan Branch Trail upgrade. This trail, which is part of MWCOG's High Priority National Capital Trails Network, is one of the oldest sections of the Metropolitan Branch Trail, or the MBT. And it shows. When completed, the MBT will provide a separated bike trail that extends from Silver Spring to Union Station, mostly along the Red Line right-of-way. This trail is the only protected bike infrastructure that connects downtown Silver Spring to Tacoma Park and Northwest DC. The city manages about a half mile of the trail along the western edge of town, and on either end, the District Department of Transportation and Montgomery County's Department of Transportation are working on their respective legs. As the mayor mentioned, the leg to our south between Fort Totten and Tacoma Park is having a public meeting. I want to note that it's happening next week on the 18th, though. So currently the trail, which is one of the first segments built, is narrower than modern bikeway standards, and it's cracked. The paving is cracked. The wood fence that aligns most of it is starting to fail, and the lack of lighting make many users feel unsafe in the darker hours of the day. So the proposed design seeks to address these concerns and more. The second presentation is on the preliminary designs for the New Ave Bikeway Section D, or District Connector. This is the third leg of the New Ave Bikeway, which currently has sections A and B from Holton Lane to the north to Poplar Avenue in the south in their final stages of design. And when completed, the New Ave Bikeway will be the only substantial bikeway infrastructure on the eastern side of the city, creating a direct connection between the Tacoma Langley Crossroads, the Recreation Center, Sligo Creek Trail, 2 Capital Bike Share stations, and DC's existing bikeway infrastructure, per the District Connector. The proposed route through the Pinecrest neighborhood was chosen after other routing options were deemed to be infeasible, and the team coming up will dive into that more in the presentation. So, without further ado, yes? Yes. Sorry? Oh, this photo is on the Metropolitan Branch Trail. It's if you were to if you're looking down the trail and you looked immediate to your left, Bell Ziegler Park would be right across the street. So this is Tacoma Avenue. Good question. And you'll notice that there is a sign posted to say this is a narrow trail, please dismount if you're passing people, which is not usually how bikeways are supposed to work. So without further ado, I would love to hand it over to our project lead from RK&K, Rob Gillespie, and Andrew Aguilar, also from RK&K, and these two will present on the 2 projects in further detail.
Great. Thanks, Alex. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, City Mayor and Council members. As Alex said, I'm Rob Gillespie with RK&K, Consultant Project Manager. I'm also joined this evening by my colleague, Andrew Aguilar, who was the lead design engineer for both of these projects. As Alex mentioned, we are here to present the completed preliminary designs for both the Metropolitan Branch Trail upgrades and the New Ave Bikeway District Connector projects. We'll start with the Met Branch Trail and we'll follow with the District Connector project. So again, as Alex mentioned, the preliminary design was funded through an MWCOG Transportation Land Use Connections Grant. And the project limits are approximately a half mile of the City of Tacoma Park's maintained section of the Metropolitan Branch Trail that runs adjacent to the west side of Tacoma Avenue and Fenton Street from the DC line to just south of the New York Avenue intersection. Most of the trail segment runs parallel to the CSX Railroad and WMATA's Metro Red Line. So the project goals of these trail upgrades was to upgrade the city's half-mile section of the trail, improve safety and comfort for pedestrians and cyclists that use the trail, implement the trail improvements while avoiding impacts to property and utilities, identify stormwater management requirements, maintain mature trees with consideration given to remove undesirable trees along narrow roadside buffers that may impede trail user comfort and safety. Now, the design team collaborated with project stakeholders during this phase, including city planning, city public works, city maintenance, the public, Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, WMATA, Montgomery Ride-On, and Montgomery College to develop our final 30% design. And our 30% design proposes to reconstruct the existing trail on the same alignment with enhancements that focus on user safety, comfort, sustainability. Those include a uniform 11-foot width. The existing trail varies from 8 to 10 foot wide. So this would upgrade it to, again, an 11-foot width for the whole corridor typically. We would maintain buffer separation between the trail and the roadway. New asphalt pavement section with a raised trail elevation of approximately 3 inches with the goal of reducing heaving from tree roots and also to help save trees and reduce city maintenance requirements to maintain the trail. The goal is also to avoid impacts to utilities, right of way. Again, CSX Railroad and WMATA's Metro Red Line, existing fence and retaining walls which border the west side of the trail. We'll also install continuous lighting along the trail and at all intersections. Excuse me. And perform ADA compliance upgrades for pedestrian ramps and bus stops. We also propose to improve safety and connectivity to the trail, sidewalk network, and to Bell Ziegler Park at the Tacoma Avenue and Buffalo Avenue intersection. The improvements include eliminating the mid-block crosswalk that's located about 120 feet south of the intersection. We'll also construct curb return extensions at Buffalo to shorten the pedestrian crossing length and encourage traffic calming. It's right here. Relocate both the north and southbound bus stops closer to the intersection here. So you see the proposed bus stop here and a proposed bus stop here for, this is northbound, this is southbound direction, bus stop here and here. And we're also going to investigate installing stop signs to create an always stop condition. The trail upgrade design will also include new bike racks, benches, wayfinding signage, and lighting. As I mentioned before, that is consistent with the city's streetscape manual. The good news is that we are not proposing any impacts to right-of-way, utilities, or street parking for the trail upgrades. Tree impacts will be required to accommodate the improvements and will be fully assessed during the next phase of design when we will complete a thorough inventory and condition assessment of all trees within the project corridor, working closely with the city arborist. The 30% design phase is nearly complete. And to summarize the steps we've completed for this effort, the design team performed a field walk with agency stakeholders in November, a public informational field walk with the community in December, respectively, to review project constraints and concerns to inform the draft 30% design. The draft 30% design plans were submitted in February. A community meeting was then held to present the draft 30% design in March. Agency and community comments on those draft designs were collected and considered for preparation of the final 30% design. The final 30% design report, including plans and construction estimate, were submitted last month. Our preliminary scope of services concludes with this evening's presentation to City Council. And just to reiterate some of those community engagement pieces here for your information. We determined that out of 46 survey responses, 98% of the public was generally supportive of the project. The next steps, as Alex had mentioned, is the city is going to work to secure additional funding for the next stages of design, which would be detailed design, semi-final or 60%, and final design 90 and 100% respectively. And then hopefully then secure funding for construction. With that, I'm happy to turn it over to the City Council or others who have any questions.
Great, thank you so much. And Councilmember Siemens is up.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentations tonight. I just had one question, and that was that I think currently the road surface is higher than the existing trail, and your schematic seems to show that the trail now will be higher than the road surface. Is that accurate?
So to be clear, the road surface, the trail is approximately 8 to 12 inches or so higher than the road surface. That being because it's behind the curb. The curb is about 8 inches, and then you have some general grading that slopes towards the road. So that effectively makes the trail a little bit higher than the road surface.
You're saying that's now the condition?
Yes, sir. That's the condition now. So what we were proposing in our profile for this preliminary stage was to essentially raise it another 2-3 inches, not much, just to get it out of the to kind of assist with the root zones and try to get a little bit higher above the root zones.
Yeah, it makes sense. I was just concerned because my memory was telling me the trail was below the road surface, and I was worried about runoff. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to pick up where Councilmember Siemens left off. Rob, thank you so much for this presentation, and that was actually one of my questions around stormwater components. So can you just kind of walk us through a little bit whether or not there will need to be any major stormwater improvements with the modifications that are being proposed for the trail?
Sure, and we're going to do a little bit more of a deep dive in terms of what we would be required for stormwater management, but we do know that the project will require some treatment. We did just really scratch the surface at this level in terms of on-site stormwater management treatment. Either way, we would inform the city of the requirements that they could then choose for their MS4 and decide where they can meet those requirements. We may not be able to fully meet the requirements, for example, on this project. Don't quote me on that. That's not, but we may find that later, and that will then be addressed by providing stormwater elsewhere in the city.
Okay, that's helpful. And then it seemed as if things like bus stop relocation, it's often hard to tell from schematics. It's not moving the bus stops in any major, not a full block or anything like that. It's really just a few feet it looked like a few feet from the graphic.
That's correct. It's approximately 120 feet or so, just to get it closer to the intersection. And again, that'll work well with the curb extensions, the placing the crosswalks at the intersection as well as the bus stops. Just trying to make it safer for everyone. We did something similar for Flower Avenue. We really tried to relocate bus stops closer to the intersections and with those curb extensions. So it's a similar type approach.
Okay, great. All right. I don't see any other lights. But thank you so much. I'm excited to see this project move forward. I think it's going to do wonders to help to improve connectivity in the community. So thank you so much, Rob, for working on this.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gibson.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the question about identifying and then what the consequences of finding that there will be or that there may be stormwater management issues. So this is up to the 30% stage is design. So if there were significant costs associated with stormwater management infrastructure, when does that get to be identified as perhaps an obstacle that can or cannot be gotten past, depending on the costs?
No, I don't think the costs or the stormwater management requirements are going to be an issue for the project moving forward. We did throw some preliminary costs based on our engineering judgment and other projects into our built-in contingency into our construction cost estimate at this level. It's more just the detailed engineering of looking at drainage areas. Where are we going to daylight some of this stormwater and meet these requirements? Where can we meet on site? A lot of these retrofit projects are very difficult, as everyone knows, to come apart to squeeze these in, but stormwater is very important. And so if we can't meet the requirements 100% on site for the project, the city will find other locations. That's traditionally been the approach, is to find other locations within the city to satisfy those requirements.
Other locations to do some stormwater mitigation, is that what you're saying?
Yes,
get the
sir.
MS4?
To help offset the project for MS4,
Okay,
yes,
but
sir.
but the cost then gets shifted. If it turns out there's significant cost, the cost of that gets shifted to another site.
Correct. And the cost, I wouldn't
Yeah.
expect the cost to be significant.
Yeah,
when
I was bringing this up, and it'll become clear when you start talking about the new Avenue one, but in all cases, there might be unforeseen stormwater mitigation issues. So thank you for sharing.
Sure.
All right. No more questions on this one. I think we may be ready to move to New Hampshire Ave.
Fantastic. All right, give me just a second, please. Okay, so now I'd like to present the New Ave Bikeway Section D, or District Connector. We'll start coining it the District Connector, as Alex had mentioned. Again, this design, we're also very fortunate to be able to support the city with this preliminary design, which was also funded through an MWCOG Transportation Land Use Connections grant. Project goals: provide a low-stress, safe, and enjoyable bikeway. The District Connector would complete the city's southernmost bikeway connection to DC, implement cost-effective improvements while avoiding impacts to property, environmental resources, and utilities, and again, identify any stormwater management requirements. Our 30% design approach uses the low-speed, low-volume neighborhood streets for the bikeway improvements. Key facility types that were considered for this District Connector include sharrows, or shared lanes, with appropriate pavement markings and bike route and wayfinding signage, shared use path where the city right-of-way is available, and city planning and public works staff, along with RK&K, conducted site visits to evaluate 2 potential routes and select a preferred route for survey and engineering. Project stakeholders include the City of Tacoma Park, the community, Montgomery Planning, and utility owners. As a frame of reference, the city is completing final design for both New Ave Bikeway sections A and B. I think that we're all aware of that, and Alex mentioned it, but I want to reiterate that. And those extend along the southbound side of New Hampshire Avenue from Holton Lane south to Poplar Avenue. That's a distance of about 1.2 miles. The District Connector project would extend from, would extend approximately a half mile from Poplar Avenue to the DC line at Kansas Lane and Eastern Avenue Northeast, where there actually are existing on-street bike lanes on Kansas Avenue Northeast. As I mentioned, city planning and public works staff, along with RK&K, assessed 2 potential alignments. Now, alignment 1 is shown here. That starts at Poplar Avenue, which is the southern limit, again, of Section B, that extends west along Poplar Avenue and along south along 4th Avenue, west along Westmoreland Avenue, and then south along Kansas Lane to the DC line. Alignment 2 would extend south of Poplar Avenue for about 350 feet, where it borders the Sligo Mill Conservation Area. See the green area here, and extend beyond the Tacoma Tire and Auto Shop, where it extends to the current dead end of Sligo Mill Road here, where it would continue on Sligo Mill Road, and then head north to an existing paper street extension of Westmoreland Avenue, and then daylight with Kansas Avenue at the DC line. Another consideration of, I will say, that has also been, I guess, identified on the plans is an extension of 4th Avenue to this street. I think it's Eastern Avenue. Apologize. I think it's Eastern Avenue here, and then daylight to. No, I'm sorry. 4th Avenue to Eastern Avenue. Correct, because we know that these DC DOT is working on a streetscape improvement. I believe that's already under construction right now. So that's another consideration, is to just extend that piece. So that said, alignment 2, as I mentioned before, was not selected as it would require impacts to Tacoma Branch, Stream Valley, and the Sligo Mill Conservation Area. It would also require narrowing of southbound Maryland 650 travel lanes to implement an 8-foot wide shared use path with about a 1 to 2 foot buffer for about 350 feet of the bikeway. Alignment 2 would also require costly retaining walls, environmental permitting, and mitigation of impacts and utility relocations. Again, for those reasons, the design team selected alignment 1 for the preliminary design. So I'd like to quickly review each block, starting at the DC line and extending north to identify the existing conditions, constraints, and the proposed improvements. So from Kansas Lane to Eastern Avenue, the roadway width along this segment is approximately 23 feet wide, curb to curb, with street parking on the east side. That includes non-continuous variable width sidewalk on both sides. The existing right-of-way is located at the back of the sidewalk. The proposed improvements would include sharrows with bike route and wayfinding signs and construction of a continuous 5-foot wide sidewalk on the east side of Kansas Lane. That's shown here. For Westmoreland Avenue from Kansas Lane to 4th Avenue, this segment has a very narrow width of 18 to 19 feet with very limited right-of-way and street parking on the south side. Now there's continuous sidewalk on the north side and a missing sidewalk segment on the south side of Westmoreland. The southeast corner of Kansas Lane, southeast corner of Kansas Lane and Westmoreland Avenue intersection here is a bus stop. So the proposed improvements include sharrows with bike route and wayfinding signs, again, construction of curb extension to provide a minimum 5-foot wide ADA compliant sidewalk for the bus stop area, and new high visibility crosswalk markings. Street parking will be maintained along Westmoreland Avenue from Kansas Lane here south to 4th Avenue, which is not shown in this clip, but so moving to the next segment, 4th Avenue from Westmoreland Avenue to Poplar Avenue. The roadway width varies from 19 to 25 feet, again with street parking on both sides and limited right-of-way. The proposed improvements would include sharrows with bike route and wayfinding signs, reconstruction of speed humps. There's several speed humps along the corridor. Those would be reconstructed to be bike-friendly for the ones that are not. There are a few we found in our site investigation that were, and some were not. And we would also consider some curb extensions in locations where the roadway was a bit wider, just to encourage traffic calming. See what else. We would also maintain the street parking. So we wouldn't be any impacts to street parking, and we would again install the high visibility crosswalk markings shown on the plan. So our last segment is Poplar Avenue from 4th Avenue to New Hampshire Avenue. The roadway width varies from 22 to 26 feet wide, and street parking on both sides with restrictions between 4th Avenue and Goody Avenue. Street parking is prohibited between Goody and New Hampshire Avenue, and there's continuous variable width sidewalk about 4 to 5 feet on both sides of Poplar Avenue in existing conditions. Now, the proposed improvements would include a curb extension on the north side of Poplar Avenue, reducing the effective road width to effectively 22 feet wide. That would allow us to construct a 10-foot minimum shared use path on the north side. And I'll just point out here, so these are the improvements proposed at the Section B. So these improvements would tie into the Section B, New Ave Bikeway Section B project limits, southern limit, both sides of the intersection here at New Hampshire Avenue. So there are no proposed impacts to the right-of-way. Street parking impacts are limited to the south side of Poplar Avenue between 4th Avenue and Goody Avenue. And utility impacts are limited to 2 utility pole relocations. The 30% design phase is nearly complete, and just like to summarize those steps completed. The design team performed a field walk with City Planning and Public Works in October, and public informational field walk with community in December, respectively, to review project constraints and concerns and to inform the draft 30% design. Those draft 30% design plans were submitted in February. A community meeting was then held to present the draft in March. Agency and community comments on the draft were collected and considered for preparation of final 30% design. Final 30% design report, including the plans and construction estimate, were submitted in May, and our preliminary scope of services also concludes this evening with presentation to City Council. We had approximately 20 survey responses from the community, and 75% were generally supportive of the project. The next steps, again, to secure additional funding for detailed design, semifinal and final design, and ultimately construction. Thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Gibson.
Thank you. I guess one question which I have shared with the staff here has to do with the low impact criteria for the streets. And I live just on Goody and Poplar, and this is a busy, busy area twice a day. So I guess I question what data was used to determine that from New Hampshire onto Poplar and over to Fourth, that isn't high volume versus low volume, and the impacts of that, and then there's also a blind intersection. So I've shared with you all, Alex, and so I do hope that those get addressed and really what data was used.
Yeah. So thank you for the question, Councilmember. We worked with the Tacoma Park Police Department to conduct 2 traffic volume assessments. They put out traffic counters for a week at a time, one on Poplar between Goody and New Hampshire, and one on 4th between Poplar and Cockerell. Is that the next block over? That first block after Poplar on 4th Avenue. And the numbers that came back, I'll admit I'm not a transportation engineer, so I ran them by colleagues at the Montgomery County Department of Transportation and by our contractors, Rob and his team. And those numbers were deemed by no uncertain terms to be considered a low volume street on the average of the course of the day. Of course, there were spikes at peak hours, and those spikes were mostly indicative of the fact that it is an easy cut through from Eastern Avenue to New Hampshire Avenue without going down to the corner of New Hampshire and Eastern. But that said, I took that information and some of our survey responses. The dominant concerns for people who expressed concerns about this project were about cut-through traffic and sort of feeling like it was fast and unwieldy, and that there were not enough sidewalks, that it was hard enough already to be a pedestrian. Why would we add new things to that space? To the first question, a lot of the treatments you see here, we opted not to go for a fully protected bike facility throughout the whole extent of the project because the traffic volumes are pretty low. But recognizing that traffic still feels precarious, a lot of the tweaks to this are traffic calming measures that should slow traffic using physical road narrowing tactics. So for here on Poplar, in the visual, you can see that the road was narrowed quite substantially coming off of New Hampshire Avenue in an effort to slow down cars that are zooming up to either enter or exit. And then a number of other stops along the way, there are curb bump outs or lanes being narrowed such that it should hopefully slow traffic somewhat. And to concerns about sidewalks, we added, the design added a sidewalk on Kansas Lane, which for anyone who's walked along the existing sidewalk, narrows to about like 1.5 feet at one point. Truly a wild width of sidewalk at the moment, if you can call it that. But in addition to that, I would encourage, we tried to balance concerns from residents about maintaining some amount of on-street parking, not over-engineering this project so that it got too expensive and too bulky. And in that balance, we felt that this was a good design for the current traffic volumes and for the current uses of the street.
I guess I just want to clarify that, as you say, in terms of the traffic counts that were taken, average you know, I'm not sure when average happens, but when you've got, I'm not sure when bike traffic is going to happen at the same time as vehicular traffic. But it does worry me a little bit on a couple of places. And then lastly, as I asked the contractor of the other project about stormwater, the Westmoreland area is frequently flooded in when bad rains. So I'm concerned about there may be some costs there, either to mitigate that or, as was explained, mitigate it someplace else. Anyhow, to manage that as well as the corner. If you want to go to, back to the slide, the first slide that he put up, which comes from DC to Kansas. I just want to point out an area that this on the far right, this corner here and down Westmoreland is where it gets low and gets flooded, but also up at the corner here, which is a T corner really, because that must be a paper street or something going forward. But this is a hill here, and people have a tendency to blow down that hill because they see the light at Easter, and they want to make that. So that it becomes a potentially dangerous spot, and I don't know if it can be mitigated. I bring it to your attention. Also, I wanted to clarify with you and then with my residents that during this phase, this is where we get comments, and those comments could include design changes. There are other ways to get to DC from Poplar and New Hampshire. There are other streets to go through, other possibilities. Will that be considered? May that be considered?
Yeah, thank you. So part of our conversations with the consultant in looking at alternative routes, I think the most clear one originally in the original thought of this whole bikeway was that it would just go straight down New Hampshire Avenue to Eastern. Unfortunately, the public right-of-way that's available there is so narrow that we would have to, as a city, basically acquire property along that route to make it wide enough to put a real bike facility there, which felt infeasible. And of note, once you get to New Hampshire Avenue, there's no bike infrastructure on the DC side of that, and to our knowledge, no plans to add any. So we then looked up to Kansas Avenue Northeast because there was existing bike infrastructure, and that Alignment 2 option, which uses some paper streets, goes along the conservation property from MMCPPC, then up Sligo Mill, seemed like a really interesting option because it also keeps the route closer to a lot of the retail, especially if there's some amount of development there in any far distant future. However, as Rob mentioned earlier, the cost of both the financial cost and the environmental cost of building out retaining walls into what is a very sensitive stream valley conservation space. If we were even allowed to do it by MNC-PPC, which is already quite a long shot, the cost of doing that and building out retaining walls to support a trail along that space would add to the cost of the project really significantly. So again, in sort of looking at the balance of how much do we want to spend to make what, by the consulting team, by Montgomery County, who reviewed these designs, felt like was a really high quality alternative that didn't require that, was what we ended up pursuing.
Right, I understand why you did, and I understand what you were saying about MNC-PPC in terms of acquiring that land there, Sligo Mills. However, you called it a sensitive area. Let me say it's a wasteland. In some ways, it's a trash, because just last week, I should have said in my comments, we picked up 16 bags of trash. This is an area that would benefit from investment. This is an asset that the city has that's not being used. The county, and it would be just a wonderful asset if it could be properly used. But I'll take your word for it that you're not going to go that way. That it's too. But just aside, there's a piece of land that should be better utilized as an asset, taken care of by the county and us. But I guess I wanted to, there are other options besides those two that you mentioned that have been brought to my attention. I want to make sure that residents can propose other options
Yeah.
for consideration to get to DC from Poplar in New Hampshire. And I can talk with you separately about it, or I get those to you.
I mean, residents are welcome to bring back, any feedback anytime. My contact information is readily available. I love doing walkthroughs. But that said, something that I pointed out in our community meeting back earlier in the year was that there are a number of other sort of parallel, blocks that you could go around in this configuration. You could go up Poplar an extra block and then go down, does it go all the way up to Kansas? I don't have my map up in front of me. You could go up Cockrell instead of Westmoreland. All of those routes have substantial grade changes. We picked the route that is flattest, knowing that if this is a route that we want as many people as possible to use, that the lowest amount of grade change is important. I think the route that continues up Poplar another block and a half and then goes down through the dead-end street and then kind of goes right back up again. That was the grade change of biking up to the top of a 3-story building, biking down it, biking back up it, and then biking back down it. And I'm happy to talk with any residents who are concerned about other routes, but sort of at this stage in the process, there weren't a lot of alternatives that seemed viable.
Okay, I guess we just might need to explain that to residents.
Yeah,
In
I'd be
terms
happy
of
to.
grade, going down 4th all the way is the flattest.
By
all
a
the way.
substantial margin.
Yeah, I mean, rather than going down Westmoreland and over to New Hampshire.
Oh,
go all the-
well-
Now, there are some, I understand that there are some infrastructure, it gets narrower there, et cetera. There's parking on both sides, but it's not the route chosen was a combination of grade as well as other things. I just want to encourage my, residents in Ward 3 to weigh in that, as you say, that this is the time where comments and public engagement is supposed to take place, and other options considered, other concerns raised, and that I will encourage them to do that. And that will be done how? How will engagement take place?
Great question. So the next steps for this and the Metropolitan Branch Trail rely on us acquiring funding. We're working on it. But once we acquire funding to pursue the next stages of design, it's likely that the next leap forward will be about a 2-year process. And within that 2-year process, we'll develop the fine-grained details of what that engagement will look like then, but it will involve on-site walkthroughs, it will involve community meetings. I wasn't able to do it this time, but for this particular area, I would love to hold an in-person meeting at the VFW because it's so central to this particular project, and also different online avenues. For these 2 projects, we piloted a new style of engagement where we put up yard signs along the routes with QR codes. It's the first time to my knowledge that we've ever done it, and I think it yielded some good success and some good lessons. So I look forward to taking that model of making sure that it's right in people's faces and available to be accessed and extending that.
Sorry, Alex, so the public engagement phase you're saying is maybe 2 years?
I'm sorry. If we get the funding that we want
Okay,
to
so first
pursue
of all-
design work,
But-
it would probably be 2 years to get the project to a final
Okay,
design
but
stage.
isn't there a stage here of engagement before you decide to get the funding? Because you,
If someone's interested in commenting on the 30% design,
Yeah,
how
that's
how
what-
do they do that?
At this point, the 30% design that you've seen was the sort of final design that's being presented. So all of the stages prior to this, the survey, the public meeting, I've gotten a lot of emails, were the place to sort of add that feedback. However, when we get to the 60% stage, there will be additional feedback opportunities.
Right. So
Yeah,
can we
that's
go?
it. That doesn't
yeah.
work. That
so
doesn't work.
so Alex, can we go back to your first? I think it was your first or second slide where you
From
had.
the introduction.
Yes.
I think that I might need some help getting that on the
Sorry.
screen, but yeah.
Where you walked through
Yeah.
how the various phases and community engagement along the way and where people can provide buy-in. I think one of the things that did stand out to me was the response. And I think that I'm just going to be 100% honest. People don't pay attention until things are about to be built, and that is the worst time ever for people to start paying attention because the designs and things are done. So I think that one of the things that is helpful for us on council in particular is when we're having these meetings and when we are trying to like really pushing to get people to weigh in, because it is critical that people are weighing in during the appropriate times for them to do so, because we can't keep doing a timeout. We haven't heard from everyone, right? When there's been a series of meetings and there's been webinars and there've been mailers put out, and now that it's something real, people want to have feedback. So can you just kind of walk through this slide one more time?
Yeah. Again, we just sort of wrapped up this preliminary 30% stage, and this is the phase when throughout it is when a lot of engagement is happening, and that's when we do a lot of different kinds of activities, and it's when the broad contours of the project are created. So it's not a baked in stone project. There are definitely changes that still could be made, but they tend to be less broadly conceptual after this stage and more like, how are we doing this? We're mixing up the pieces that we already have on the table. So the next stage of both of these projects will be to pursue semifinal designs or semifinal and final designs, and that's when a contractor is brought on board and we're told, this is the big picture. Now we need to start doing the technical analysis to make sure the stormwater impacts aren't bad, that we're not unintentionally causing any major traffic issues or parking consequences, that all of the permitting that we need from the county and the state are up to snuff and in order. So especially during the first part of this 60% semifinal stage is when we would conduct most of our engagement effort, because those are the places where we have the most flexibility to step back and tweak things, because every step further along in the process we get, we are adding analysis to support it moving forward. And so if we change anything, it has to jump all the way back down the ladder and get reanalyzed back up to the top in context with everything else around it. So in the context of when to engage with this, this process, we did a lot to try and reach people. I hand canvassed for each community meeting and went and put flyers, like door knocking style, in every house along the route and every side route for both the MBT and the New Ave Bikeway Section D. And I did that twice. So I don't want to say that, we can always do more, and there's always people who are hard to reach and, don't always, are not good at, or not traditionally engaging in the way that we want as the easy way to engage. However, I do feel like we really did exhaust a lot of our options to get good feedback for this particular project.
May I build on to what the mayor's has made the main point, I think, that is that people do not engage seriously and not across the board in terms of types of people and their technical expertise until they see something like what you've presented here. Yeah. And I have to say the graphic gives the impression, when I was looking, it means during this 30% stage, there's lots of flexibility. What you're saying to me now is we are at the end of the 30% stage.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that flexibility is now minimized. Yep. So I just kind of feel that the residents, those 20 responses is not adequate to start putting money into the next stage. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the plan. I mean, there are some places I tweak, but concerns I have. But I do not think that this isn't, even though you went to great lengths, this because there wasn't something to look at concrete. And that's what people need.
And so I will say, I will just to counter that argument, with the latter segments of the New Hampshire Ave project that impacted my neighborhood, the number of meetings, and there were a lot of visuals that were provided, but you had to show up. So if you went, there were graphics around, well, we could do this, or we could do that, or this is preliminarily what we're thinking, and residents would give feedback, and then they would get tweaked. And so it was a very kind of interactive process, but you had to show up. So I don't want there to be this narrative out there that the engagement, you saw nothing and it was just all hypothetical. It was not. It was done in a way that allowed for residents to see some preliminary options, to engage around schematics. But again, if people did not show up, I mean, you can only do so much. And I know that for the latter segments, there were neighborhood associations that were tapped. There were lots of outreach efforts that took place. So I do think that it is important for us on the council to also acknowledge when we may be hearing from a very vocal minority, and it could very well be the case that the residents who really care about this thing showed up, said they like it. Everyone else might have been apathetic about it. And now we have a design, right? So I do, and again, it's not to say that our community engagement processes cannot be tweaked, but I am getting increasingly concerned that we get to the point where we're doing a lot of work on a lot of things, and our staff are really trying to engage, and we get to a point where we've done our due diligence and we have something ready to move forward, and yet we're now saying we need to go back. So I do think that for this process in particular, and there's other processes we can argue about, but for this one in particular, having lived on the first phase of it, the latter part of New Hampshire Ave, I know firsthand the amount of outreach and engagement that staff had with the residents around those designs. Councilmember DeBala?
I was going to ask what the next steps are, so flag that one but before that, my experience in Ward 2 was that very few people showed up to the tours, but we did one, and it was not just bikers, although they were there with their bikes, but people who lived right there who were concerned about parking and who were concerned about whether there'd be trash on their lawns. And I agree, there's, at some point, people have had their opportunity. Now, maybe because, I'm just gonna suggest that because there's been a change in council members, maybe you're not aware of whatever did or didn't happen beforehand. So maybe that's something that you could follow up with Councilmember Costick to see if there was
what's been done
anybody that
yeah.
showed up or not.
Yeah.
And maybe it's different from the other two stretches.
I could possibly not have been as involved as I should. I did show up at least one of the meetings,
Yeah,
and not the other, but because conflicts. So I need to talk with my residents. I hope that their support, the indication that you've gotten thus far is minimal. To say that you have to show up is absolutely true. It's just, and sometimes we dismiss the comments that are made by the folks in this room because they're not representative, but they show up. So you kind of go with those that do show up, and if adequate efforts were made, and I missed it, and there are there's support for it, then we go forward. I guess it's like those seeing this map this map, and this is likely gonna happen, somehow gets people engaged, and what has been done, which is probably above and beyond normal, didn't seem to raise the issue, but I will have to check around. I'll let you know whether people felt like they were approached, whether they had a chance or not. If they didn't feel like they had a chance, then I'll let you know.
That'd be appreciated. And because, we're not out in the community as every day as all the council members are, and so we really value your pulse on who's talking about what, and when we have things that we want people to show up to, we really appreciate when you bring people into a room. So any wisdom you can continue to bring is really helpful.
Councilmember Fulcher.
I was looking at the third from the end, third from the last slide, and that was the one that I was thinking of as the timeline for this specific project. It mentions, is somebody able to help you?
This is Rob's presentation?
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
The one that says project schedule, and it
Yeah.
talks about like what you did in September of 22 and October of 22, and then maybe you could share with us what some of those documents that you were passing out looked like, so that we would have an idea of the work that you put into it.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is.
There it is. Magic. So also, as a point of clarity, when although this is the preliminary phase of a larger project, when it's a sort of finite start with a contractor, have a contract, close out the contract, we also refer to that as its own project. This is one of a variety of sub-projects that will contribute to the larger one. But as far as the kinds of materials that we put out, for the public informational field walk, I made a flyer that I'd be happy to share copies of, that I went and hung door to door. I sent to the Pinecrest Neighborhood Association, and they distributed that information. It was posted on all of the city's social media platforms and website. And then I also have, just been building a roster of people who've expressed interest in various projects that I will often direct message, as well as a lot of the larger community organizations that, deal with public health or interact with the different corners of the community, like CHEER and the Tacoma Langley Crossroads Business Association.
And I'm assuming that the survey wasn't only available at the in-person meeting, it was probably available online.
The survey was available online. It was virtual. It was translated into Spanish and Amharic. And the photo from the slide that we were just on prior to this was the yard sign that was posted in the neighborhoods with a QR code. So, and then for the community meeting, we had a separate round of flyers that also I went out and hung door to door. And then for tonight's meeting, it was posted online, and I also emailed everyone who's participated in the process with the designs for them to take a look at in advance. Thank you.
And are the slides going to be posted online with the designs on them? They already are?
These
Okay.
are already online.
Yeah. Councilmember Honzak.
If it's okay with my other council members, I have a fairly different track related to this project. I want to make sure that you feel like you guys have closure on those key concerns, at least for now. Okay,
In order to keep this meeting moving, let's focus on your questions.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. I was going to just share with you, we had the RISE students take a look at some of these slides with us in advance, and I thought I would share some of their questions because I thought it might be interesting to folks. They asked, I have four buckets. One is, what happens when you get to Kansas and you transition to the DC area? Does it look similar to what you're proposing, or does it change, for example, to like a buffered zone?
That's a great question. Right now, what exists at present is when you cross Kansas, it becomes striped bike lanes. So they're not buffered and they're not protected by bollards or cars, but they are striped on the roads. So it is actually a clearer, the road gets wider, so there's more room to play around with when you cross into DC. And then that section of Eastern Avenue is also in the CIP bucket list for DDOT, the District Department of Transportation, for a redesign, and that whole intersection is going to get a big safety upgrade, including bike lanes going north-south. So the crossing there will become even clearer when that happens. I believe it's in the FY26 budget right now.
Okay, so we just aren't able to, because we don't have the width, we can't do what they're doing.
Yeah, it's a little too narrow. And
that was what they were wondering.
yeah.
And I think it was a really excellent question.
Yeah.
Second of the four is looking at the other sections, not this section D, but as we go up north. We were all just wondering, does the trail not connect as you go up to University, that white strip that I see on the map there? Is there a connection there
So
to
not-
the
not-
Tacoma Langley Transit Center? And can you speak
Not
to that?
yet. That's what will be called Section C,
Okay.
the Crossroads Connector. And that's in the works. Part of the challenge there is that because University of New Hampshire are state highways and the Purple Line is being constructed, the whole area just feels like kind of off limits for the moment. But we are looking at whether or not it makes sense we've been asking SHA, the State Highway Administration, to give us the space to just pop it up. That hasn't yielded much yet, but we're optimistic that something will happen. And at the very least, there's thoughts about if we can't go straight to University and straight to the transit center, are there, similar to this bottom leg, ways to maybe wind back through the neighborhood in a way that would be kind of low impact, a more comfortable ride on a bike, and still get you where you need to get to.
Okay.
But again, all of that's
such
very,
a key connector. What did you call it again?
The
The Crossroads
Crossroads
connector. I
Connector.
love
C for
it. Love it.
Crossroads, D for
Okay. We'll be
District.
rooting for that, and something very safe, because that's a dangerous zone.
Yes.
All right. And then the third observation that they made, sort of a question that I couldn't answer. They said, we noticed that in a lot of these documents you're sharing with us that RK&K is often our contractor. Comments?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we've had a very positive relationship with RK&K.
Yeah.
They've been the contractor on the other sections of the bikeway, but all of those have been acquired through a competitive bid process at the beginning of each project, and they presented a good job. I wasn't here when those previous sections were selected as a contractor, but
Are they always the cheapest option? That was one of their questions for me.
that I am not sure.
Okay, I told them I thought I thought it was probably the answer was, tell me if I'm right, that the answer was probably not always, because there might be other considerations. Is that a fair statement?
That is correct.
Okay.
And one of the perks of having them on board as the same contractor for section, the semifinal and the final designs for A and B, was that the funding for those projects was funneled through the state, and by having the same project contractor on board, it made the procurement process a little smoother.
Okay, thank you. And then the last just bucket, which is a little bit out here, but I thought I'd share, is as a group, we were brainstorming with Councilmember Fulcher as well. Some of those issues we brought up the last time we were talking about these bikeways, which was sort of the foundational issues in the city of bike accessibility. And if they have time, we're interested in doing a very rudimentary walk around through some of the wards, looking at bike accessibility issues, like going to some of the buildings to see if they had elevators, bike sheds, and whether people were allowed to have bicycles in their buildings. Just thought I would share that. Thanks.
Those are really good observations.
Awesome. Well, most of my questions have been answered. My big question around the what is it? The DC connector,
The district connector.
district connector, was the grade issue.
Yeah.
It's steep in my car. I couldn't imagine how it would be on a bike. So I do appreciate how you all really took some of those grade issues into consideration, because, having bike lanes that are just too steep and too challenging to climb is utterly useless. So I do appreciate the fact that you all are taking that into consideration as well. And I know that, we've talked about, the community engagement piece and how does that work. And so definitely as we, fingers crossed, continue to be able to obtain the resources needed to move forward, that we are taking the necessary steps to making sure that we're engaging and keeping residents informed about the process and what we're doing. But I do really appreciate, Rob, you for walking through all of the work that you've been doing, and Alex and Roz, all of the work that you all have been doing, because I know this has been a multi-year endeavor. And so to finally see the district line is just it's a very exciting thing to see. So I appreciate all of your hard work on this.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. All right. So the last work session that we have should be, yes, but it should be very, very quick. It's not really. It's just really, really to just give folks a quick understanding of what we are going to need to vote on next week. Shouldn't take more than 5 minutes, but basically we're required. I'm sorry, Mr. Eubanks, do you want to prep this, or should I just go ahead? All right, I'm gonna rock and roll. Get us out of here. Fingers crossed by 9:45, no later. 9:30? Do I have a 9:25? All right. This resolution is really just about making sure that we are designating our agent. We have to have someone that has the ability to sign off on various matters, and that we're designating the appropriate authorities, specifically reporting it to the department, the State Department of Assessments and Taxation. So basically putting David on record as that person. I do want to encourage folks to check your email. You should have received another draft item for next week as well. But just wanted to make sure that everyone understands that that is what the purpose of this particular item is. We have to do it occasionally just to make sure whenever there is a change in the designated agent, we skip always just make sure that we cross our T's and dot our I's. So are there any questions, thoughts, concerns about this matter? What? You were right. Councilmember DeBala said 9:25. All right. Well, if there are no more questions, comments, do I have a motion to adjourn? All right. Councilmember Gibson motions. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. We're done for the night. Thank you all so much.